Up next, tips on making your garden home come alive in every season. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, where we're always looking for creative ways to create more beautiful outdoor living spaces. Now in today's show, we're going to take a look at enlivening your garden with color in all 4 seasons. But before we get into that, I want to talk just a moment about this concept of the garden home. You see, a garden home is a series of small garden spaces which surround a home. These spaces are called garden rooms. And within each one of these rooms, I apply the 12 principles of design that I use when I create a garden. You see, these 12 principles are keys for garden design success. And in this show, we're going to touch on a few of these principles that will help your garden come alive in every season. We'll talk about the importance of having a good framework or structure to carry your garden home from season to season. And I'll explain how time impacts the garden in both a literal way and also in a more abstract way. Plus, we'll touch on the most popular design element of all, that's color. So if you're ready to give your garden the spark it needs to carry it from season to season, then this show is for you. So let's get started. Whenever I talk to people about designing a garden home, the number one principle that always gets them the most excited is color. And why should that be any surprise? Who wouldn't want a beautiful garden full of lots of color? I think it's safe to say we all enjoy going to the garden centers in the spring and seeing the waves of color that they bring in. You know, I particularly like some of these new introductions, new plants and flowers. The range of bloom and foliage is phenomenal. I particularly like it when they take an old classic and improve upon it, like ivy geraniums. I got a behind-the-scenes look at the latest ivy geraniums during a visit to Germany recently, and I have to say, these are going to look great in American gardens this year. Exceptional breeding programs, like this one by the Flower Fields, are making ivy geraniums better than ever. These cascading geraniums are great performers because they tolerate the heat, and they're knockouts in window boxes, hanging baskets, and containers. In fact, they're so carefree, they don't require deadheading. And once they start blooming, hold on to your hats. Just look at the range of colors. The Ivy Geranium Freestyle series is nice in that it blooms early and can tolerate the heat. Plus it rewards you with abundant flowers. Just remember, as with any frequent bloomer, geraniums are heavy feeders. So make sure you give them plenty of food. I fertilize my plants with a complete balance fertilizer, such as 20-10-20. You know, it was my passion for color and my interest in new plant varieties that inspired me to take this part of my garden last spring and transform it into a laboratory for color. I divided the garden into 4 spaces and created a color theme for each one of them. I have an orange border, I have a burgundy and purple border, I have a mauve and pink border, and then this border is largely made up of blue and purple flowers with accents with variegated foliage. And even this late in the season, you can see the color theme coming through here with this Lilani ageratum and this Carita angelonia. It's a great combination. They've been showing out all summer long. All right, we'll get back to this blue and purple border a little later. First, I want to walk over here and show you the orange border and focus on some of the key plants. Now, as you can see, the big bold splashes here come from Coleus. I love this series of Coleus called the Stained Glassworks series. This one is called Kiwi Fern, and the one in the center is called Tilt-a-whirl, and there on the end, that one's called Copper. Now what's great about this series is the more sun they get, the bolder the color. Some of the other plants I've integrated with the Coleus include this Tropicana Canna, Verbena bonariensis, that's the tall one, I call it Verbena on a stick, Lantana mishuff, this little strawberry gomphrena, and along the edge I've used a purple wandering Jew and Margarita sweet potato vine. Now if you shift over here to the burgundy or red border, you can see that this Coleus molten lava really steals the show. Now I've planted it in combination with this Canna Black Knight, and you can see that the center of the leaf, the color of it here with the Coleus, is almost a dead match for this wonderful Black Knight Canna. And take a look at the pepper here on the other side of the Coleus. You see, I'll go to any length I need to get the effect I want. This pepper's perfect with the color theme. Now take a look at this grass, purple fountain grass. It's an annual, but what an outstanding contributor to this border, both in terms of its color and the fact that its inflorescence, or flower plumes if you will, move in the wind. They bring movement to the border. Now just to the other side of the grass you can see this incredible salvia called Paul's. It has been blooming all summer long, and next to it is a Coleus-like plant called Perilla. Now along the front or the base of the border I've planted pink begonias, this old-fashioned plant called chicken gizzard, a lantana called Carlos lantana, and some bright red pentas. Now this is the mauve and pink border, but before I describe it, let's take a look at how this entire garden changes from season to season. In the spring, I fill these beds with lots of tulips. I mean hundreds of them. I really pack them in, and I want you to notice how they stand out against this evergreen background. And I also like to plant around the edge of the borders pansies and violas for a little extra color. These beautiful blooms will not only give my fall garden color, but the plants will persist through the winter and reemerge in the spring with lots of bloom. Okay, now back to the mauve and pink border. Like all the borders we've seen today, I try to start with foliage first. Foliage is so important when delivering great color. And what I've used here is yet another Coleus. This one's called Fright Night, and I've planted it in combination with a Cordyline. This one's called Red Sensation. These plants work really well together because the deep dark veining in Fright Night Coleus is echoed in the color of the foliage of the Cordyline. Now another foliage plant I've used here is this Plectranthus or Cuban oregano. This is the silver variety. Isn't it gorgeous? It's the perfect plant for growing along the edge of the border. And of course, gray foliage plants work with anything. Now some other plants I've used here are muley grass, and I just love how ethereal it is. You can actually see through it to other plants. This plant is called Persicaria, and it's just about to take over the bed. It's so happy here. And behind it you can see one of my favorite salvias in full bloom. This one's called Indigo Spires. Now earlier in the season it was Clcome Sparkler that really stole the show. Now we've come full circle and we're back to the blue and purple border. And as you can see, one of the most outstanding plants here is this one called Persian Shield. Just look at the incredible foliage. Like I've said many times, with foliage like this, who needs blooms? The perfect complement this time of year with this Mexican sage or Salvia leucantha. Just look at its long velvet spikes. Now I mentioned earlier that I like to grow variegated plants with this color scheme. 3 that I used this summer have included Variegated Miscanthus, the sedge, and Cuban oregano. This light colored foliage is the perfect contrast to the dark blues and purples. You know, these borders have brought me so much pleasure this year. I just can't believe how much they've grown. When I started in the spring, they were tiny plants. Hope some of the combinations are helpful to you as you lay out your spring garden. Now, one of the elements I want to point out that helps make this entire space work is this boxwood hedge that makes an oval around the space. It serves as a backdrop for the plants, but more importantly, it's a framework for this garden. It gives me visual interest in this space even in the winter. Now, speaking of winter, how about some tips on helping you deal with ice and snow? Start by mulching your flower beds. You might be surprised how much protection a layer of mulch will provide your plants over the winter. Use bark, straw, pine needles, or leaves. I even use my old Christmas tree and garland. In my vegetable garden, I like using frost blankets like these to protect young plants. You can also keep winter vegetables growing longer by using a movable cold frame. To keep my tree roses from being damaged, I protect them from extreme temperatures by wrapping them with burlap cloth. Shrubs and trees can be some of the most expensive investments in our gardens. So let's take a look at some ways to keep ice and snow from damaging them. I've learned that tying up certain hedges and large shrubs, like this boxwood, can keep the snow from weighting down the plant's limbs. And knocking the snow off trees and shrubbery is a good idea. It will keep plants from bending and breaking. But don't try to knock the ice off your plants. Let the ice naturally melt to avoid damaging limbs and foliage. These are just a few suggestions that you can put to use that will take the worry out of winter. In virtually every garden I've ever seen, shrubs and trees have played an important role in its structure and framework. If you had plans to plant shrubs in your garden last spring but didn't get around to it, don't worry. The fall is one of the best times to get them in the ground. This is because with cooler temperatures and shorter days, the plant is going dormant. There'll be much less activity with the upper part of the plant, but there's still plenty going on with the roots. By planting them now, the plant has plenty of opportunity to establish itself and settle in before it flushes with growth in the spring. Now there are several things you can do to help them along. You want to encourage all of these roots to spread out and take hold in their new home. One of the best ways to do this, if the plant is in the least bit root bound, is to gently tear the roots like this before planting. Once you get the shrub in the ground, add a root stimulator that contains vitamin B1 to the water, and then water it in. You see, this root stimulator helps to accelerate the development of feeder roots. Many of these root stimulators contain a mild fertilizer, which is fine for this time of year. Wait and do your heavy feeding in the spring. You'll also want to tuck them in with some mulch. 3 to 4 inches will help keep the roots consistently moist and also help them withstand extreme changes in temperature. This time of year, there are plenty of opportunities to help give your plants a jump on spring, so don't put those gardening tools away just because it's fall. Natural structures like hedges and trees, as well as man-made structures like the sides of buildings, help to define garden spaces, to break up the garden into these garden rooms that are such an intricate part of the garden home concept. Now, while shrubs and hedges are certainly an important element in the framework of a garden, we can also incorporate a bit of structure in the garden through supports. Architectural elements like trellises, arbors, and teepees come to mind. The garden is about many things, and it's certainly all about change. Even though we have a framework in the garden that's fairly constant, we're often compelled to change out the plants from season to season. Change is also about the way the garden matures over time. Now, this idea of time in the garden is one of the more abstract or elusive principles of design that I consider when I create a garden. Let me give you some examples. Time can be about how plants change from season to season, or it can be about the age or implied age of a garden or objects in a garden. For instance, time is reflected in the way trees change from winter to spring, to summer, and then to fall. Time can also be reflected in the way a path looks old and mossy, even though it's fairly new. It can also be in the way that some plants provide an instant look of maturity. Ivy on the sides of houses, and certainly climbing roses, are good examples. They can all grow abundantly in just a few years. There seem to be certain signature plants that announce their time on the stage. For me, daffodils just say, hey, it's spring. Bright annuals like petunias and geraniums announce summer's arrival. Fall's changing leaves let me know that winter, with its snow and bright red berries, is on its way. Now, just because the season changes doesn't mean you have to miss out on some of those signature summertime pleasures. For instance, as we make the shift from summer till fall, just look at it as an opportunity to bring a touch of summer indoors, like bringing flowers and berries indoors for drying for fall arrangements. But let me show you a couple of other simple ways to hold on to summer just a little longer, starting in an unlikely place, the laundry room. The next time you launder your bed linens, just add 1/4 teaspoon of concentrated lavender oil to the final rinse cycle. I can't imagine a better way to get a good night's sleep. You know, aromatherapists even recommend lavender for easing tension and anxiety. Now, when it comes to cooking, there's nothing like a hot, savory soup for those chilly days and nights. Seasoning those soups and stews with fresh herbs can be simple any time of the year. Just chop the leaves of your favorite herbs, such as basil or Italian parsley, and put 1 teaspoon into each cube of an ice tray. Then when you want to add the fresh taste of herbs to your favorite soup recipe, just pop in a few of these pre-measured cubes and let the flavor melt in. Since fresh herbs are so plentiful this time of year, it's just a good idea to take advantage of them, whether you grow them yourself or pick them up at the farmer's market to enjoy them all year long. So whether you add the aroma of lavender to your laundry or fresh herbs to your cooking, these are just a couple of ways that don't require much time for you to enjoy a touch of the summer garden all year long. When the fall season begins to bring us all of its glorious colors in the way of leaves, I look for every opportunity I can to bring some indoors. Just take a look at some of these I just gathered in my garden. Look at the colors. Everything from golden yellow to beautiful bright reds. I just love this classic maple shape. I get so excited about all this fall color, I often bring in entire limbs and use them in my dining room. They can make a striking vertical accent. Now, you don't have to go to that extreme to enjoy a touch of fall color in your home. There's a great way to take leaves and press them and then showcase them in a wonderful rustic frame like this. Let me show you how to put it together. Now, you'll want to begin by gathering some of your favorite fall leaves. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm partial to maple leaves. By the way, this is a great project for children. Now, the idea here is to press the leaves, and you can do that by simply taking some large books and placing some tissue paper between the pages, putting the leaf in like so, and then just pressing them. And over time, they'll flatten beautifully. Now, if you don't have time for this, there's a way to speed up the process, and that's by pressing the leaves with an iron. It's really simple. I like to use recycled paper bags or brown wrapping paper like this, and all you do is take a leaf and just place it between the paper like so, and then take an iron that's on a low setting and begin to press the leaf. Now, this will flatten it rather quickly, and it'll also drive any moisture from the leaf. Now, once you have several leaves pressed, you can move on to creating the frame. Now, I just started with an inexpensive frame like this from a hobby shop, and all you do is take bark and apply it to the frame like so, covering the edges. Now, I use all kinds of bark for this, and I attach it with hot glue. All you do is apply it like so, and then place it on the frame. Give it time to dry, which doesn't take very long. I like going for pieces of bark that have lots of lichen and moss on it, as you can see here. All right, now let's get back to the leaves. What I like to do is take a piece of paper, often colored like this. This green really is outstanding. You can just see how the leaves pop on this color. To attach the leaf, all I use is a spray adhesive. Take the leaf, flip it upside down, and apply the adhesive like this. And place the leaf gently in the center of the paper, like so. And with a piece of tissue paper, just blot it gently. Now with the leaf attached, we're ready to pop it into the frame. Let me show you how this looks finished. There's that beautiful fall leaf on green paper, completely surrounded by this rustic frame. Now let's step into my workshop, and I want to share with you another project, only this time it's a way to bring the garden indoors for winter. I'm creating a festive holiday centerpiece for a winter dinner party, and I'm using some things that you can pick up at the grocery store, such as apples and pears. Now what I'm going to do is take these ordinary fruits and transform them into something extraordinary by using some cording and ribbon and upholstery tacks. Now before we decorate some of this fruit, I want to show you how it all comes together as a final presentation. You see, I started with a silver plate, and then I've stacked two clear glass cake plates, one on top of the other, creating a tree. Now with the three tiers of our tree in place, it's just a matter of filling in with fruit and foliage. Okay, now let's get back to decorating the fruit. The first thing I do is put a shine on the apples and pears, and I do this by just using some cooking spray. Apply it like so, wipe it off gently. As you can see, it gives it quite a shine. Okay, now it's time to decorate the fruit. To give it a real festive look, I like to use some of this holiday cording. Now I hold it in place by using some of these upholstery tacks like I mentioned before, and straight pins. Let me give you an example. I just finished this pear, and you can see I took the gold cording, started at the bottom, and just created a spiral all the way up the pear, like so, holding it in place with straight pins that I just push into the pear. Let me show you how it works. It's as simple as that. The upholstery tacks come in handy when you want to create a strap of gold or ribbon along the side of a piece of fruit. You see I've pinned it in the top and in the bottom here. Now you can come up with any design you like. That's what's so great about this idea. And you can see I'm following a green and gold theme. I've accented this fruit with some gold and silver Christmas balls, as well as some grapes and evergreens. Now when you get this in place with candles on your dining room table, it's absolutely magical. What a simple but elegant way to bring the garden indoors during winter. Now let's move on to spring. Nothing says spring to me like daffodils. I love cutting a bouquet and using them indoors. But here are a few things to know about arranging daffodils before making a bouquet. I've always regarded the daffodil as one of those delightful symbols of spring. Not only are they beautiful, but they're also easy to grow and care for. Because of chilly temperatures this time of year, enjoying a bouquet of these indoors can be very refreshing. However, knowing a few tips on how to use these as cut flowers can make your flower arranging more successful. First, it's important to know that the sap that flows out of the ends of the stems of daffodils is detrimental to most other flowers. Compounds in the sap will cause other flowers, if used with daffodils, to go limp or wilt. So it's best to use all daffodils in an arrangement or set them aside for 12 hours in a separate container, changing the water a couple of times before mixing them with other flowers. When arranging them, I think one of the most effective ways they can be used is to bundle them in tight bunches or groups like this, all of the same variety, like this pink variety called Salome. Since their stems can be easily broken or bent, grouping them with shortened stems and binding them together with a rubber band near the flower heads can make a handsome presentation. Longer stemmed flowers work better if placed in a vase or a container with a wire mesh, such as chicken wire. This method will allow you to turn their faces in the direction you want, and you can fill in between the flowers with an evergreen, like the classic boxwood, to help set off the blooms. Daffodils are such a joy to have in the spring, both in your garden and your home. Containers are certainly an important part of my garden home in just about every season. Just take a look at this little fall composition I put together. Even late in the season, it's looking pretty good. You know, I follow that basic simple recipe whenever I design a container, and you can see it represented here. In the back I have something tall and spiky. In this case, I've got this Miscanthus grass, along with this variegated Dianella. Now to fill in the center of the composition, I'm using this chrysanthemum called Tulip. And then to cascade, I'm using this variegated Cuban oregano and just an ordinary English ivy. Now I've accented this composition with this little companion container with this beautiful helichrysum called Silver Spike. And what would autumn be without pumpkins? I've used a cluster of the little Lumina pumpkins. I love their bright white color. Following my simple three-step rule for containers, using tall and spiky elements at the back, something round and full, and then plants to cascade, will always bring beauty to your garden home in every season. We have covered so much territory in today's show, as well as 4 different seasons. We've looked at the role color plays in the garden and the importance of structures in the landscape. We also looked at creative ways to extend the garden from season to season, like bringing the garden indoors through some easy hands-on projects. I hope you'll take to heart some of the ideas you've seen in today's show and be inspired to transform your garden into a garden home. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
Join me as we explore this garden home and learn about some of the key design elements that make this garden truly unique. We'll discover the age of this house and how it's inspired the creation of garden rooms surrounding it. We'll see how color and whimsy are used, plus get some tips on framing and screening views. It's a show full of practical tips and lots of gardening projects you won't want to miss.